Hello again, everyone. Welcome to Washington Gun Law TV. I'm Washington Gun Law President William Kirk. Thanks for joining us. Coming to you from Washington's premier indoor shooting facility. Of course, that's Security Gun Club right here in Woodinville, Washington. Hey, we're going to head down the highway a little bit to the great state of Oregon because, as you know, last week, Oregon, you had a huge win. Now, it wasn't totally unexpected. We kind of had anticipated that Judge Ratio down there in Harney County, he had read the Constitution and, in fact, had read the Oregon State Constitution incredibly well, did some incredible research historically on Oregon, and came to a huge ruling where now Ballot Measure 114 is permanently enjoined. Now, that really doesn't change anything for you down in there, Oregon, because you'd been living under an injunction anyways. But what does the future hold? That is, what is the state of Oregon, or what could the state of Oregon do now that this ruling has been made? So today, let's geek out on that for a little bit, and let's talk about, so what's next for Oregon gun owners? Okay, so what we are talking about yet again today is the huge victory out of Harney County, Oregon last week, in which Ballot Measure 114, absolutely one of the most unconstitutional pieces of gun control legislation ever passed in the history of the United States, should point out also narrowly passed, thank you Multnomah County for all your votes, however, was completely struck down. Now, there were several provisions to Ballot Measure 114, but the two big provisions was, number one, a pre-purchasing licensing requirement. That's right, you would have to go get Oregon's permission first before you could then go exercise what is supposed to be an inalienable right. Or you have to go through a background check in order to get a background check. The other piece, of course, was a high capacity, or what we like to call here standard capacity magazine ban. Now, in striking down those two provisions and Ballot Measure 114 in its entirety, Judge Ratio relied exclusively on Oregon constitutional provisions as well as Oregon case law. So this case is not decided under the Second Amendment. This case is not decided citing to cases such as Heller and McDonald and Bruin. Rather, this case is decided completely and exclusively using Oregon constitutional analysis and case law. It's an incredibly well-reasoned and incredibly well-worded opinion. So now, obviously, the state of Oregon is going to appeal, right? They're completely crapping their pants. Well, one would think that the appeal, by the time I'm recording this video, would have already been filed. I mean, so that's certainly the way the state of California reacts anytime they lose. That's certainly the way the state of New York reacts anytime they lose. That's certainly the way the state of Illinois, wait, never mind, the state of Illinois never loses, okay? But what is the attitude of the state of Oregon here? Well, in trying to geek out and get ready for this video, I did a little research. I found this story right here on KGW, one of the news affiliates down there in the Portland area. And as you can see from the headline, Oregon residents react after state judge rules gun control measure 114 unconstitutional. Oregon Attorney General Ellen Rosenblum plans to appeal the decision in the next few months. Now, the proponents of this legislation said that this was absolutely, positively necessary to save lives in Oregon. Now, I know that Judge Ratio didn't find that, and nor should he have, because it's a laughable argument, but that's their position. And if that's really what this legislation is all about, you're going to get around to appealing it, what, sometime after the holiday season, sometime after you get your taxes done? I'm not really sure where the lack of urgency is for this piece of legislation, considering where the proponents of it have spoken before. Now, what could the state of Oregon do? Well, they could ask for direct review to the Oregon State Supreme Court. But in all likelihood, when you take a look at the constitutional mandates and how the Oregon court system works, the appeal would be heard first by the Oregon Court of Appeals. Now, once the Oregon Court of Appeals rules, the winner and or loser of that could appeal to the Oregon State Supreme Court. However, that appeal would not necessarily be guaranteed as a matter of law. Instead, the Court of Appeals decision could be the final ruling on the merits. To take this case outside of the Oregon State court system and into federal courts is virtually impossible because this entire case was pled and decided exclusively under the Oregon State Constitution and interpretations thereof. Now, in addition to all of that, to all the proponents of Oregon Ballot Measure 114, in particular, the Reverend Mark Knudsen, who was the sponsor of the bill and has been the talking mouth of this bill. He was quoted in the same story as saying, "Voters were clear that these life-saving policies should be the law in Oregon. We know these policies have been upheld by courts in other states, and though we anticipate Judge Ratio would rule the way he did, we have been preparing for the appellate process for some time now." Well, Reverend, let me address that in reverse order. Number one, if you guys have all been preparing for this appeal for months, why then is it going to take your Attorney General several more months to get around to filing the appeal? Number two, it really does not matter what the voters want. It's whether or not what the voters want is in fact constitutional. You see, you could take the same argument, apply it to a very red state. We know there's a constitutional protection against all individuals getting married, regardless of their sexual orientation. But if you had a state, a really, really deep red state that just decided, nah, not here in this state, the voters decided otherwise, what do you think the court would do with that law? And rightfully so. So Oregon, the truth of the matter is that by the time this thing gets done ricocheting around all the appellate courts and finally gets to any sort of resolution, you're more likely to be subjected to a new piece of legislation coming out of your state legislature sometime in the coming year. As a matter of fact, do not be surprised if there's a complete rewrite of Ballot Measure 114. There might be a couple of tweaks, but usually it's just putting whipped cream on a pile of crap. So in reality, you're more likely to have your rights stripped by your legislature and or another ballot measure before you ever get Ballot Measure 114 ultimately resolved. Listen, if you have any more questions about what's going on in Oregon or anything else related to what's left of our Second Amendment rights, you guys should know how to get a hold of Washington gun law by now. If you don't, that's okay. That information is down there in the description box. Now, in the meantime, let's everyone remember that part of being the lawful and responsible gun owner, like we talk about all the time here, is to know what the law is in every situation, how it applies to you in any instance that you may find yourself. Until next time, thanks for watching. Stay safe.